Hello to all astrology enthusiasts. In this video, I want to discuss retrograde Venus in Aries and Pisces. The planet Venus from March 4th has become fully retrograde for us until April 10th at 2 p.m. Also, before and after the retrograde, we will experience two stationary periods of Venus for several days when certain thought forms will be fixed. After the retrograde motion, we will begin to bring our ideas and decisions into reality. So, retrograde Venus in astrology is a key period when the planet O, which is responsible for love, values, finances, beauty, and harmony, seems to delve into itself, prompting us to reassess these areas. During this time, unresolved emotional issues come to the surface. Old relationships may remind us of themselves, and internal values require reevaluation. The energy of Venus becomes less apparent, less extroverted, and can lead to doubts and feelings, may bring financial adjustments, changes. For example, in preferences for aesthetics and beauty. And here, Aksha, it is important to avoid impulsive decisions, both in love and in finances. Since many desires and emotions during this period undergo a stage of testing for authenticity, this is a time for our deep analysis of what truly brings us joy and satisfaction. Also, for completing unfinished emotional stories. In general, retrograde Venus in Aries, this is a very powerful time for revisiting personal desires, values, relationships, and our financial decisions. So let's analyze the energies in detail. Retrograde Venus in Aries. Firstly, Venus in Aries expresses itself very boldly, passionately, impulsively, but retrograde motion makes us stop and reconsider what we truly want. This means it's a period when our old relationships might return, but not to continue, rather to teach us some important lesson. Here, issues of self-respect, independence, and personal boundaries are activated, and all of this comes to the forefront. In matters of love and relationships, there may be breakups, a reassessment of dynamics. In couples, the return of former partners and a realization of true desires in partnerships. If we touch on the topic of finances related to Venus, it's important to avoid large expenditures here. Analyze how and on what we spend resources and correct past financial mistakes. If we talk about the topic of creativity related to Venus, inspiration may come through returning to some old projects or rethinking styles and approaches to certain project activities. Overall, our retrograde Venus in Aries is a period of reevaluating personal desires, initiatives of love, and financial decisions. Since the fiery, impulsive energy of Aries encounters the slowing effect of retrograde, in its usual position, Venus in Aries acts passionately, boldly, even egocentrically, but in the retro phase, it makes us reflect. Are we truly achieving what we need, or are we just succumbing to momentary impulses? In relationships, there may be returns to the past, but not for continuation. This is very important to understand. Here, it is necessary to analyze past mistakes. Financially, this is a period of caution, especially with risky investments or impulsive spending. Additionally, we experience an internal struggle between the desire to be independent and the need for recognition. Naturally, this requires certain work on our self-esteem, values, and the balance between positions I want and what I really need. Now let's look at the symbolism of the degrees. Venus became retrograde at the 11th degree of Aries, and it is represented for us in the form of the image of a nation's ruler. And the main key to deciphering this is the power that arises from the collective desire for order. In simple terms, the key focus here is attention. It is worth paying attention to Venus's interaction specifically with the theme of power, order, and the integration of one's desires into the system of collective norms. Venus at the 11th degree, Aries in retrograde motion forces us to rethink our attitude towards personal power, personal initiative, and desires within the framework of collective structures, where our ego encounters the necessity of self-control. And here the main focuses within this degree, the symbolism of this degree, need to be directed specifically towards the fact that Venus, as the planet of values and relationships in Aries, acts boldly, independently. But here her energy is precisely limited by the formal frameworks established by collectives, the collective order. And this speaks of reevaluating the freedom of choice, how much we act from personal desires and how much we follow social norms. The ruler of the nation symbolizes power, but not as a dictatorship of the ego, rather as the necessity to subordinate impulses to some higher order, as the necessity to structure personal desires in accordance with collective processes. This may indicate a certain limitation of our self-expression in favor of societal laws. Psychologically, this speaks of a crisis of self-determination, questioning how free our will is if ito is shaped by external norms. And here Venus raises the question of the value of inner authority over our emotions, over our instincts. What is important during the retrograde Venus in this degree? Firstly, understanding your role in the social context, how personal values fit into the overall order. Secondly, testing the boundaries between personal independence and collective demands. Also, the topic of working on self-control comes to the forefront. Not the suppression of impulses, but rather the conscious management of your energy in relationships or finances. And of course, the question of power in partnership. Who controls the relationship and on what basis? And this degree raises a profound question of self-identification through limitations, through the awareness of inner power, inner personal strength, which is especially relevant in the retrograde phase of Venus. And also let's pay attention to the aspects that Venus will make during the retrograde transit. I remind you that before the retrograde, we talked about Venus in Aries. There are additional videos on the channel. Be sure to watch them. Well, let's immediately consider that the retrograde motion of Venus began with a square aspect of Venus to the asteroid Pholus in Capricorn, which once again confirms the clash of the personal with the collective. It is precisely at this degree that Venus, in its stationary position, highlights the issue itself. And this square creates precisely the tense situations that are related either to sudden challenges in our relationships, finances, or personal values where responsibility and maturity are required. The asteroid Pholus symbolizes unexpected twists of fate, situations that are beyond our control. Moreover, in Capricorn, it intensifies the pressure from social or career circumstances. This can manifest as a crisis in relationships due to unresolved lessons from the past or clashes with the rigid frameworks of the system, or an unexpected need to take on more financial responsibility, or here conflicts between personal desires and external obligations are possible. Here there may be breaks with those who hinder growth, or a sudden realization that old strategies both no longer work. The key to working through this is not to run away from difficulties. Consciously take control of the situation. Learn to balance between personal ambitions and the demands of reality. On March 8th, retrograde Venus in Aries conjuncts Mercury in Aries. And here this conjunction might trigger a wave of reflections, a return to old issues related to personal relationships, money, and values. During this period, communications with former partners or people from the past may resume, and there will be an opportunity to reconsider previous decisions, previous situations concerning financial aspects, love and friendship. And since Venus governs feelings and material values, and Mercury is associated with communications, this aspect can become a moment for working through misunderstandings and old conflicts. This is also a favorable time to reassess your beliefs regarding values and attitudes towards money, also to correct mistakes made in the past and establish harmony in communication. It is important to be especially attentive, patient during negotiations, avoid hasty decisions, and act with the understanding that past mistakes can be useful for adjustment and improvement, let's say setting a course for future development. And the peak of the conjunction falls on March 12th. On March 14th, Venus forms a sextile with Pluto in Aquarius. This creates favorable conditions and opportunities for transformation in the areas of personal relationships, finances, and values. What does transformation mean? Changes when you can correct the situation. The aspect opens up a chance for deep changes, which occur precisely through frank conversations or clarifications of hidden emotional motives. It may be necessary to rethink and reassess your attitude towards feelings and money. And in these areas, if they have become stagnant or do not bring you joy and satisfaction, it is especially important to pay attention here. The sextile helps bring these areas to a new level of development through powerful changes, using communication and considering who is involved here. Pluto. It is responsible for these changes. And Venus, it is responsible, of course, for feelings and material matters. In general, the period when this aspect is active can become a time of purification, when old fears, blocks, and emotions in relationships can be truly recognized and worked through. And here, it is important to approach this aspect with a certain readiness for change and with the understanding that this needs to be done, it needs to be transformed and let go of in order to achieve a certain harmony. On March 16th, retrograde Venus in Aries is in a trine with the asteroid Juno in Sagittarius. And this aspect creates harmonious opportunities for us to review and strengthen our long-term relationships, especially those related to partnership, marriage, or spiritual values. In general, Juno as an asteroid symbolizes union and commitment. Venus in Aries endows all these processes with decisiveness and passion, allowing relationships to be refreshed or restored through open, honest, and sincere communication. And the aspect helps us reconsider the dynamics of partnership, strengthen emotional attachment, and enhance the ability to support mutual growth in a couple or partnership in a union. The trine will also contribute to finding a common, let's say, spiritual path with a partner, or possibly provide an expansion of emotional boundaries. Precisely through intellectual understanding, because it should still be about communication. It's a very good time to clarify your roles in relationships in order to determine what values actually connect you. In a couple, other situations may arise where you need to work with ideas about freedom in the relationship or with the idea of commitment in love or marriage. Overall, the aspect will stimulate the development and renewal, specifically, of partnership relations. On March 18th, retrograde Venus in Aries will begin to conjunct the Sun. The Sun is still in Pisces, but when the exact aspect occurs, the Sun will already be in Aries. And this aspect will create a period of very deep self-reflection on matters of love, relationships, and personal values. After all, the Sun will highlight these themes, a time when the desire to reassess one's own may emerge. Feelings, self-esteem, desires, needs. The Sun will illuminate the importance of individuality and personal ambitions. Venus in Aries will emphasize themes of passion and initiative in relationships, and the conjunction may prompt us to reevaluate our interactions, relationships with others, with ourselves, and determine which values and forms of love are truly important to us. During this period, situations may arise where we find that we need to break free from old patterns, from old relationships that no longer bring us joy. Retrograde Venus encourages a return to past themes. Now is the time to review what brings joy and satisfaction in relationships and what, on the contrary, limits our freedom. It is also possible that old unresolved issues, problems in relationships will undoubtedly come to the surface and will require attention and adjustment. It's time to reconsider and reassess how we express our love, our feelings, our attachment, what is important to us in long-term partnerships. On March 20th, we have another interesting recurring aspect when retrograde Venus in Aries will once again conjunct with Mercury, but this time with retrograde Mercury in Aries, and it will create an opportunity to reassess communications in relationships and analyze one's own values and ways of expressing feelings. Considering that both planets are retrograde, they will make us return to old topics, misunderstandings, conflicts, and unfinished conversations, especially in the context of personal connections. And this, of course, will greatly influence our thinking through Mercury. During this time, it is important to carefully review, for example, all correspondence, conversations, and to restore lost connections and emotions that Venus will provide us with. In this aspect, they will intensify the need for love and acceptance. And Mercury, at the same time, will emphasize how we convey our thoughts and feelings. In general, working through this aspect requires a certain attentiveness to words and sincerity in communication. In everything, we need to undertake everything that will help us complete, finish, and bring to an end these misunderstandings in personal relationships. On the same day, RETROVENUS will conjunct with Neptune in Pisces, creating an atmosphere of very deep emotional experiences, providing romantic illusions and idealization. And this, of course, can lead to confusion and misunderstandings in relationships. Neptune is a planet not only of our dreams, but also of deceptions and self-deceptions. Conjoining with Venus in Aries, it can intensify this tendency to idealize a partner or relationships. But considering that this is a retrograde phase, it may be related to us returning either to old dreams or to forgotten romantic ideal relationships that in practice do not meet our expectations. The aspect can bring about illusory notions of love or inspire us to attempt to rekindle past relationships, or we idealize past relationships, but ultimately this, of course, leads to disappointments. To work through this conjunction, it is necessary to do so through awareness. It is important here to work on your illusions, not to succumb to them, not to give in to temptation, to perceive certain relationships or feelings as something perfect, idealized, even mystical, if this does not correspond to reality and real circumstances. It's time to cleanse from old, unrealistic notions of love and establish a genuine connection with oneself in order to understand what is truly important and valuable. All these 5 aspects will gain strength, and in the 20s of March plus 4 days, incidentally, all of this will happen on the day of the spring equinox. And on this day, our astrological year begins. In general, in my opinion, all the numbers look very symbolic. The Sun enters, for example, into Aries. And I would say that not only cleansing occurs here, but also a great beginning of beginnings. On March 24, Venus in Bovni will again align with the North Node of the future. And naturally, there will be an opposition with the South Node here. But These aspects open up the possibility of revisiting our relationships, values, and personal goals, directing attention to how our past connections and life choices have influenced our development. The North Node symbolizes our path of evolution and destiny. In conjunction with Venus, it certainly provides a chance to rethink which qualities in relationships and within ourselves we need to change in order to move towards our true goal. Retrograde Venus helps us return to old lessons to understand which behavioral patterns, which emotional attachments no longer help us grow. It's time to eliminate unnecessary attachments for a more conscious approach to feelings and interactions with the people around us. And by building relationships with consideration of our higher life goals, we can create more harmonious, stable, long-term connections and partnerships. These will indeed help us develop personally. What else is noteworthy here? Everything happening in the sky during this period is occurring within the eclipse corridor. Evidently, there are radical changes taking place that will divide our lives into before and after. I would also like to point out that the spring corridor lasts for 2 weeks. The midpoint falls on March 21st. I think everything is very symbolic and very fateful because this is exactly what it will be. The period marks the beginning of the astrological year. It's practically the beginning, as if of a new life on a different level. On March 27th at 11 Spars, RETROVENUS returns to the sign of Pisces, right on the eve of the solar eclipse about Aries. And by the way, this is the last eclipse on this axis, which will open long-term development programs in our lives. Minimum 2 years, maximum years. March, RETROVENUS in Pisces will go into sextile with Uranus in Taurus. And here the aspect will bring unexpected renewal in the realm of love, in the financial sphere, in matters of self-esteem and values. The aspect will encourage some unconventional solutions in relationships, sudden encounters, re-evaluation of values through some unexpected situations. After all, this is Uranus. RETROVENUS will urge us to return to past feelings or a project, but Uranus will introduce an element of surprise here, accelerating these changes. By the way, unexpected financial opportunities are also possible here. Creative breakthroughs, inspirations, new romantic prospects, new acquaintances that will appear in some unconventional circumstances. To work with this aspect, it is very important to be flexible, mobile, adaptive, open to changes, not afraid to experiment, and to trust above all your intuition and inner voice. On March 29th, during the solar eclipse day, RETROVENUS in Pisces aligns with Saturn, bringing very serious tests and re-evaluation in the realm of our relationships and finances. This means it's a time when old emotional and material attachments will require reassessment, new responsibilities, and some structure. Unfinished karmic lessons from the past will manifest here. For example, in relationships, there may be tests of strength, the need to take responsibility, or to end outdated ones. Some connections, the financial aspect of life will require discipline and responsibility. Situations may arise that make us think about long-term investments or fulfilling debt obligations. Working with this aspect requires, of course, patience according to Saturn, a mature perspective on what is happening, and a readiness to bring order to personal and material resources. March 31 is a day quite historical, let's say, a significant day in astrology when Neptune will move into Aries. On this day, retrograde Venus in Aries will form a trine with Mars in Cancer. And this aspect will bring a very powerful emotional impulse to the realm of our relationships, feelings, and actions. An aspect of passion, desire, intuitive understanding when emotions are easily expressed through actions. But we must consider the retrograde nature of Venus. Again, this can occur in some past relationships, the return of old feelings, a reassessment of some previous decisions in love, people, or a reassessment of some financial decisions or something related to creative projects. Here, by the way, there might be emotional swings when there is an internal struggle between the desire to act and the need to understand one's true motives. All of this will come to the forefront in this aspect. It is worth working with it through awareness, certainly through conscious energy management, avoiding impulsive decisions, listening to intuition, listening to your feelings. On April 7th, retrograde Venus in Pisces is in exact conjunction with Saturn at 25 and 26 degrees, and on the same day, retrograde Mercury begins its stationary phase. Overall, well, everything is very symbolic, very powerful, strong, energetically. This all tells us that significant conclusions and decisions will be fixed in our thinking, including taking into account the transit of retrograde Venus. And, of course, when the retrograde periods end, we will begin to bring all this to life. On April 11th, the stationary phase begins and Venus will finally return to direct motion. But here I want to draw attention again to the symbolism of the degrees. Venus will be fixed at the 24th degree, Fish. And from the perspective of symbolism, here we see an image, a picture, where a small island is depicted, surrounded by a vast expanse of sea. People live here in very close interaction. The main interpretation is that it is necessary to consciously accept limitations for one's personality in order to concentrate one's personal energy and live expressing one's individuality and to the fullest extent. In other words, the degree, in simple terms, symbolizes a point of deep awareness of one's individuality. So, in general, within the framework of something greater, a whole Venus, having completed its retrograde movements and becoming stationary in this degree, emphasizes the importance of integrating personal values into the system of collective connections. And here, the main idea is that an island in the ocean is a symbol of self-restraint, which provides an opportunity to better understand oneself, one's true desires and needs. The stationary Venus forces a focus on what is truly important, not to scatter on illusions or external influences, considering also the vast expanse of water. It is a reminder that, although each of us may feel like a separate entity, we are still connected to something greater. And the question is how we interact with the world without losing ourselves. The close interaction of people on the island speaks to the necessity of deep yet consciously limited connections that allow us not to dissolve in what is happening around us, but rather to create strong alliances in this chaos. What does this mean for life? This symbol points to a moment of internal reassessment of values and relationships. And after the retrograde period, Venus is here as if in a stationary position. It has paused, and it gives us the opportunity to realize where we need to establish personal boundaries in relationships or finances, which connections are truly important, which were illusory, and what love, feeling, and harmony in relationships mean to us. How does this manifest if we remove external influences? And of course, the key to working through this period is a return to your true desires, structuring your personal energy, personal power, and realizing your individuality in the world. It's time to stop seeking external approval and learn to live in harmony with yourself first and foremost and realize your place specifically within the collective system. This will happen on April 13th, and on this day, Venus will go into conjunction with the North Node of the future for the third time. So what does this tell us? This is an aspect indicating fateful meetings, karmic lessons in love, finances, and values. This is a moment when relationship, creativity, and personal desires can guide us in a direction. Important acquaintances, that can influence our future are possible, as well as the return of forgotten partners, the return of forgotten talents in creativity, and the rethinking of our ideals, since Venus in Pisces possesses a gentle, intuitive energy. One should trust the signs of the inner voice of intuition, but not lose touch with reality. Working with this aspect involves becoming aware of your true needs in love, in resources, or the readiness to embrace new opportunities, even if they initially seem uncertain. And we take into account that Venus is stationary on this day. On April 15th, Venus in Pisces, after the evening, becomes fully direct, EU. We will discuss the transit after the retrograde movement in additional videos. And I wish you success during this transit. Subscribe, like, and share this video. See you. Bye-bye.